We are now live. So yeah, it's a pleasure to kind of meet you, I guess. I think what was either one of your fans or a friend or someone reach out and tell me about your story, and I thought it was really cool. I didn't do too much digging just because I think it's a little bit more fluid to kind of go in a conversation as if you've almost just met someone. So could you give us just a little bit of your background and what you do, where you're at, what's going on?
Sure. So we're the Kortmans, and my wife and I, with our 4 kids and dog, currently are living in a 37-foot Class A motorhome, which is huge, in Mexico. It's a 20-year-old motorhome, so it's got more bumps and bruises than I do. But yeah, so we're living in Mexico in that right now. 2.5 years ago, we sold our house in Michigan in the United States, and flying around the world, staying in Airbnbs, and just kind of exposing our kids to everything else. And that has, when we ended up coming home from that trip, our kids made us promise that we wouldn't stop traveling. And so it has, the travel bug that was in Becky, my wife and I, has fully infiltrated our kids. And so, yeah, we're now, for the next who knows how long, going to be moving about as the wind blows.
That sounds awesome. So I think that kicks off a million and one questions to begin with. What
Awesome.
first off, what is the Wi-Fi like in Mexico? Because obviously, you're traveling through there. You have a decent connection right now. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So if there's one thing about my lifestyle and what I do personally, is that I'm always and my kids know it very well. About 20 minutes ago, everything went dark, and as far as internet goes, we still had electricity, but the kids were up in arms like, the internet's down, and I'm like, crap, I've got a podcast recording in a few minutes. Oh no. And I've got 3 or 4 or 5 backups, different things, stuff that I can pull together to try and make something work. So right now, I'm coming to you from a T-Mobile connection. So T-Mobile has this really sweet deal that if you buy a certain tier with them, when you're overseas, you get unlimited data in 140 countries. Now, they cut you off anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So in our case, we've been in Mexico now, and so we've gotten cut off from T-Mobile once, and I had 4 lines and one line at a time kept getting cut off until finally all 4 were cut, and I was using Plan B. And then I recently acquired a new SIM card for T-Mobile and started a new account, and so I'm back to the next 6 months, and we'll do the dance again. But um, the reason why is because with 4 kids and 2 adults and more laptops and iPads than I can count, we consume a lot of data, and so um, we're looking at about 200 gigs a month, which is atrocious when you look at it. But it's the lifestyle we want. We want to be able to watch YouTube videos. We want to use Khan Academy or whatever it is that we're using on that day to show our kids how this works. And that takes a lot of gigs. And cellular data is the most reliable. We are parked in a campground that offers Wi-Fi. It can get sketchy, and it's terrible. Actually, it's terrible for voice calls and all that, because so many drop packets. So I end up having T-Mobile in my back pocket. I've got the campground Wi-Fi. I've got a couple of coffee shops I can go to. So there's just these things that we try to pull together to make sure that if all else fails, we still have the internet.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool and something that a lot of people I think look over when they think about potentially living out of a motorhome or a van, which is getting more and more popular as the years kind of go on. But before I kind of like get back to the root of what the reason why behind the reasons why you guys started this kind of lifestyle in the first place, what sort of things do you find yourself, obviously other than the internet, kind of having to upkeep? Because I know I kind of dipped my toes into that van life world a little bit. And I don't think most people have any idea how much upkeep there is in just maintaining like the vehicle, the lifestyle, cleanliness, you know, being connected, and then like having a life outside of just traveling.
Yeah, it really depends on your lifestyle goals. Because we are a family, we travel a lot slower. At max, we'd probably cover 4, maybe 5 hour driving in a day. And so we don't go very far, very fast. Part of that is because we have a huge motorhome, and so it just doesn't go very fast. But there's a ton more work and a ton more issues than I ever thought there would be. If I could roll back the clock a year and a half ago, I would advise myself not to purchase an RV and to look at other creative ways. There are even smaller vehicles that I would consider, like a Sprinter van or even any of the vans per se, any of the four-wheel drive vans. Um, because you can go places a lot cheaper and it's a lot easier to get around. Plus, I have spent more money trying to get parts shipped from the States down to Mexico for this beast, and it's just not something that they have parts here. I mean, even you think of an RV and you think of they have a drain hose, right? So you connect it up to the gray and black tank, and you connect it up to a valve, to a septic system, and you pull the valves and drop your loads. Well, lo and behold, due to some crazy issues, I think, long story, I lost a part to my hose. And it's called the bayonet fitting. It's the only fitting like that, and it's only used in RV situations. And so no matter what plumbing store I went to here, they're just like, "Oh, I've never seen anything like that." And I went to this one store where everybody was like, "Oh, go to that store. It's in Puerto Vallarta, and it's this awesome boating and alternative lifestyle store. It's got everything you could want except for a bayonet fitting." The guy looked at the picture and went, "Nope." And you just can't get RV parts here. Um, I am sitting in an RV campground, but everybody here, we happen to be north of Mexico City in San Miguel de Allende, and everybody here, they're just like, "Oh, you need parts? Yeah, you got to drive 10 hours to the border, and then there's a parts store in Texas." And it's like, really? Like that just seems so lame. But so if I knew back then what I know now, I would not have bought an RV. I would have definitely, we thought we were downsizing, going from our house that we were renting at 3,000 square feet, which was way too much for us. But we thought we were downsizing, going to 300 square feet. I think we could probably go down to 100 square feet and be just fine. I mean, shoot, the kids are on our laps all the time anyways when we're just sitting in the RV. So it doesn't really pay to have this much space.
Yeah, I think that's kind of something I struggle with in my own life is I've definitely gotten used to having very little amount of things, and going from place to place and kind of like being back into a situation where I'm living um, in an actual room now. It every time I make a purchase, I kind of find myself asking what the reasoning is behind it, and like thinking about if I end up moving for whatever reason again, or traveling more, what that means for me to get rid of that. So it's definitely a hard balance of do I need this? If I do, how much room is it going to take? What is it like to get rid of it after that? The whole nine yards.
Yeah, and with this RVing lifestyle, um, there's more stuff that you need that you didn't think you needed, or that you don't need for other lifestyles. For example, I need a full set of tools. I need to be able to work on it to, you know, I remember when we bought the RV, I didn't own a drill at the time. because I was doing the more minimalist thing. We had lived out of backpacks, or duffel bags, really, traveling around the world, and so you don't take tools when you're flying, and so we sold all of our tools, and then we decided to change up our lifestyle, move into an RV, and it's like I need a drill. And one of the things that happened was we bought the motorhome in California and drove it back to Michigan so that we could remodel it, because motorhomes are not made for large families and they're not made for hardcore traveling. They're quote unquote made for luxury, even 20 years ago, luxury. But as we were driving through the Mojave Desert in California, the winds are really strong there, and I had no idea. And it opened our awning while we were driving down the road at 65 miles an hour, and so um, I had no tools. I had nothing to fix the awning, nothing to hold it shut, and I ended up sacrificing my one belt, because as a minimalist you only need one belt, the one you're wearing, and so I wrapped a belt around the front, and I took one of the kids' iPad cords, charging cords, that was a little questionable. It wouldn't always plug in just right or whatever. And I sacrificed that and wrapped that around the other end to hold it shut, and it worked. We made it another 4 days until we got back to Michigan, but it was one of those things of where suddenly you realize, oh wait, to really do this lifestyle, I'm gonna need tools. Oh boy. And so there's all these extra added costs, not to mention fuel, that I didn't think of going into it.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny because the way that you mentioned tools can be seen in not just the aspect of a hammer, a drill, a screwdriver, whatever, but also tools is in your own head. How do I solve this situation when something goes down that you're not prepared for and you don't necessarily have the resources at your disposal to fix it. And I think that's like another huge thing about living on the road like you're doing, is you really need to go into it with the mindset of, I'm going to be able to solve whatever happens. It's just probably not going to be done in the way that most people would think that it needed to be done.
So true. There's a lot of people that don't approve or don't think we're doing a wise thing. For one, you know, bringing our young kids to Mexico, well, you know, it's nice knowing you. We'll never see you again. I hope you have a great life because you're going to die in Mexico or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's supportive. But the the other thing is, well, this just happened this weekend. So we tow a minivan behind our motorhome, and it makes it so much easier because our motorhome can't get into many places here. So we end up leaving it outside of town in a large supermarket parking lot or whatever. And then we drive into town with our minivan. Where we are right now, we're about 5 minutes out of town, and we're staying at a campground for a couple of months, um, and go downtown, hang out, eat some food, whatever, get groceries, and come back. Uh, the minivan, its alternator went out, and I hate working on cars. I know I'm supposed to be able to know how to do this or whatever, but my issue was I'm driving to town and the alternator goes the alternator had gone out. I didn't know it, but it had already gone out, and now finally my battery was dead. And so I'm driving down the road and there's no electronics, no gauges, no radio, nothing. Everything's shut down. And my son looks at me and goes, "Are we okay?" I'm like, "I think so, but I'm not sure." And so I happen to know where this mechanic who does only automotive electronics. And so, I pulled in there and he took care of us that day. However, the thing is, my alternator was so far shot, usually he rebuilds them on the spot, takes him about 2 hours. And he was just like, "I'm sorry, it's so rusted and it's so old um, that I can't, you actually blew your alternator completely." I'm like, "Oh man." So in the States, you buy a new alternator and you put it in there. Well, it's 15 years old. A new alternator is $300-400, maybe more. And he's like, or I have this other alternator that's not a Honda authorized alternator, but it puts out the same wattage and the same voltage as your alternator. I just would need to, in English, we would call it rednecking it. I just need to, make it work and then put it in yours. And I was like, how much is that going to cost? Oh, probably, let's see, what was it? I think it was $40, all said and done. And it took him all day, but it was 6 hours from when I brought it there to when I was able to drive it away. But 6 hours later, $40 later, and I have a completely working rebuilt alternator in my minivan. So there's the thing of like, we do things a little crazy because the Mexicans do it. They don't care if it's the quote right part. If it works, go for it. And back where I came from, we call that rednecking it, but it works. There's no reason why. So a lot of our friends and family back in the States would kind of look down upon that and say, oh, you never know. You don't want to mess with automotive electronics because what if that thing, gives out too much juice and fries all of your computers in your minivan? And it's like, yeah, it's possible. It's a risk, but it's pretty unlikely. And you could get that same thing from a poorly manufactured brand new alternator. So, it's like, I don't know. We live a different life and we're cool with that. We live as best we can, as close as the locals do. But I'll never get rid of my gringo-ness.
I think that's really cool though, because at least to me, that's kind of the heart of what it means to travel like you do. And I think why I kind of fell in love with that lifestyle, as little of it as I do compared to, the situation that you've opted to put yourself in. So can you talk to me a little bit about what drew you to that lifestyle in the first place, and kind of like where your life was at as you made that transition, and like how that was doing that with a family? Because I think a lot of people out there end up making that step with a lot less around them in their life that they're responsible for.
Yeah, well, part of it was listening to folks like yourself and other people who are, living this wild and crazy lifestyle in Southeast Asia and all this, and they're, living the high life off of $1,000 a month. And so that was one thread that came in as I was listening to too many podcasts and reading too many things about how digital nomadism was totally possible and doable. But that all came from a single, generally white, generally male perspective. And so, I at that time had a wife and 4 kids, and because, so that was one thread. Another thread was that had traveled internationally before we met each other, and then after we got married, we spent a year living overseas in crazy places like South Africa and Kazakhstan. And then we came back to the States and got jobs, had kids, bought a house, settled down. And so, the travel bug was definitely another thread. And then the third thread would be the fact that we had already chosen to homeschool our kids out of a philosophical choice. Got no problem with any of the schools in the States. I mean, there are some good, some bad, but we had just chosen, it's our responsibility to train our kids. And so we wanted to do that. And we knew that before having kids. But the other thread that ties in with that homeschooling was I was running a digital marketing business. I had been working for a marketing agency and developed a digital marketing arm within that agency. And then my boss refused to allow me to telecommute. I'd been putting in 60, 70 hours plus a 10 hours worth of commuting in a week. And so it was just, I saw my kids for an hour a day. And it was after I was exhausted and right at the end of their day when my wife was exhausted and they were, it was just like, this is not the life we wanted. And so I started my own business. That was another thread that came in there because now I'm running a business where I don't even know half my clients. I mean, I've never met half my clients. And then the final straw, quote unquote, that broke the camel's back was my wife and I just kind of daydreaming one Sunday afternoon and just saying, I don't like what we have. Oh, and it was because we had just visited friends of ours um, whose kids were getting married, or we had gone to a couple of weddings of the children of friends of ours, and these are third culture kids, so they were raised in another country, and then not their home culture of the United States, and we got to see probably 30 or 40 of these third culture kids that we knew 10 years previously when we had traveled to where they were living in Kazakhstan, and we were just floored with how advanced these kids were. I mean, they were teenagers, but they were wise beyond their years. And on the way home from that and then daydreaming after that, we said, we really want that for our kids. We really want them to be world thinkers and to have a broad worldview and to not fall into this, the world thinks the way America thinks and the world behaves the way America behaves. And so that was the straw that broke the camel's back, essentially, of, okay, we want our kids to not grow up in this small town mindset in Midwest America. We want them to get out and experience and to be able to say, yeah, I've been to Thailand. I've been to Mexico. I know what life is like for locals, and I know what it means to live there for a year or as a local or however you want to put that, so that just hitting the resort towns and never seeing what true life is like, but really, really taking the culture in and knowing that um, you know there are millions of opportunities and millions of different lifestyles.
Yeah,
There's
and you
no
had
judgment, and they could do any of that.
yeah, and you had mentioned a little bit earlier that your kids were kind of the ones that told you that they wanted you guys to keep traveling, and I think it's interesting because from the perspective that it sounds like you came from, and where I came from too in the Midwest, is just a totally different mindset, or where those people are kind of looking at it as though you're forcing them into that situation. But it sounds like it's it's almost the complete opposite. How did your kids, how have they adapted to that lifestyle, and what do you think they enjoy from it that they wouldn't be getting elsewhere?
Well, I do have to back up a little bit there and say we are forcing them into this lifestyle. I mean, we're making these choices for them, and yeah, they get to have an opinion, but when it comes down to it, my wife and I are the ones who make the decisions, and so there are some things that they don't get to choose, or we do that they don't want to. And so one of the things that we learned, oh, we didn't learn it fast enough, but it was probably 2 or 3 months into our first journey. Friends of ours who were doing a similar thing said, we found out that they were eating American cereal, cereal and milk, and our kid, for breakfast. And we didn't offer that. I mean, we didn't go shopping at Western stores and all that. And we're in the Philippines, like, let's eat Filipino food. We actually had a cook who was cooking for us, and it was great. But we realized through thinking about it and talking with friends that they're going through so much cultural stress. So are we, but we can explain it. We can talk about it. We know where it's coming from. And there's a lot of travel stress. There's a lot of cross-cultural stress, and sometimes you don't always know how it's impacting you. Well, when you're a kid and it's harder to communicate or you can't yet speak, one of the things that we've realized was make food a non-issue. Allow them to have comfort in food to regulate their system and to be okay with going out and exploring new things, because you're forcing so much change upon them and so much difference that if you can bring a little peace and comfort when it comes to meal times and not force them to eat other things, they'll acclimate much better. I'm disappointed that we didn't learn it fast enough, because to this day I mentioned, "Hey kids, there's a Thai restaurant," and all four of them will boo me out of whatever vehicle we're in. They're just like, "No." So, we did burn them out on Thai food, and that's unfortunate. But um, what we've learned from that is you make compromises and you do things that are good for the kids and better for the kids. And sometimes you do things that they don't enjoy, but that's part of being a parent. Um, so backing up to that, but then also saying, like, our kids right now, the one thing that they want to go do, and it's not that they want to return to the States or they want to, quote, return home. They refer to our RV as home. Um, they want to visit grandpa and grandma, or they want grandpa and grandma to come here. They really just want to spend time with grandpa and grandma. And when we look at that in the grand scheme of things, I am so thankful that our kids have that longing, because it's for a people. It's for specific people, not for a place in a comfort zone. Like, they don't care whether grandma and grandpa come here or whether we go back to Michigan to go visit them. They just want to spend time with those two people. And that's a fantastic thing. As far as, like, what else have they experienced in all this? We have a funny story about, after living in South Africa with the kids for 2 months, maybe 3 months, there's pictures of Nelson Mandela everywhere. And we've talked about Nelson Mandela. They've learned about it. They understood what apartheid was and all this, and they understood how his role in helping change all that. And one day, while we were walking past another picture of Nelson Mandela painted on the wall, my daughter looks up and goes, "Wait, you're saying Nelson Mandela was black?" And it's like, the innocence of that was fantastic, but also she just kind of went, "Oh, now it all makes sense." And this realization that she is, being raised in the epicenter of racial tension right now. Still, South Africa still has a lot of issues. Not saying the U.S. doesn't. We probably have just as much, um, but they're more out in the open, and you can see the segregation happening. And for her just to be like, "Oh, that's not something that you would experience in the States," and so they enjoy that. She still talks about that. Um, these kids just live for this. We've been sitting still now for probably 3.5 months, and we'll be here for another 3 or 4 more. And I can start to see our kids are already getting antsy. Like, yeah, we've seen the same trees, the same yard, the same driveway, the same city for months. When are we going to go see the ocean again? When are we going to go do this? And so they're very adventurous kids.
That's really cool. And I think a lot of those values that you're kind of instilling in them are things that most kids don't get nowadays, and is the reason why our society, at least in the United States, uh, feels kind of sick or lost or, disconnected from what really matters. Do you think that they'll have a difficult time moving forward, kind of, um, I guess, connecting with people that have lived more of a sheltered life? Because I think one of the things that you end up feeling when you live more of a nomadic life like that is you feel a little bit more cut off from other people because they don't necessarily relate to you in the same way that you could relate to someone else that's traveled more often.
Right. Individuals who travel end up more often than not marrying or partnering up with other individuals who travel. It's because travel just so dramatically impacts your worldview that happens. So, my wife and I are just one example of that. Um, but that being said, um, there are more and more. Well, first of all, third culture kids, you have to know a little bit about that. Um, Home culture, and then a second culture is where you're raised or where you grew up or whatever. But you're taking bits of your home culture into that, and yet you'll never be part of that second culture. So you end up having a third culture. The friends of ours that I'm talking about, they no longer really fit in the United States, and they no longer really fit in Kazakhstan, where they were raised for 14 years of their life. And so like you're a US citizen and you're going to US colleges and teaching in US schools, but really your heart's in Kazakhstan, and you speak Kazakh and Russian and English. And it's like this whole mix up of, like you said, they might not fit in, they might not connect well. And there's a lot of studies and a lot of books and a lot of reading done to support third culture kids, because we have that for missionary kids, for military brats, for uh, diplomatic kids or diplomatic families kids. And now the location independent families movement, we have that same thing going, of where folks like us are purposefully choosing to raise third culture kids. And so, one, the pool for them for connecting is much larger than it's ever been, because there are thousands of other world schooling families or nomadic families. And so they'll be able to connect with these sort of kids who've had similar experiences to them, who can watch a documentary and been like, you know, I see that you put that temple in there and that you talked about that, but I've been there and you're missing a big story behind that temple, or something like that. Not that they're going to be cocky, I hope not, but that they'll be able to connect with that because they've been there and studied it and learned about it firsthand. Um, they're going to find those connections with other kids and other teenagers and other adults who have had similar experiences. So I think, like, on one hand, I'm a little concerned because we're choosing for them that they will never,
Still there?
that, yeah.
Sorry, it cut off for a second there. No, you're good.
I'm concerned because we're choosing for them that they won't ever have that home to return to, or they won't have this, group of friends that they grew up with or whatever. But in reality, I don't ever hang out. If it weren't for Facebook, I would never know where any of my friends were that we grew up together. And so, like it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that our kids are more, because of the experiences that they're facing, they're more able to adapt in new circumstances. So they'll show up to a playground, and within 5 minutes, they'll be able to make a friend, even though they can't speak the same language, and they'll be able to work things out and have fun together. And that's the sort of thing of where I value the fact that our kids can, in any circumstance, can make friends and can figure out how to navigate, versus you only have these people. So I think that we're dooming them to a certain lifestyle of, I have a broader worldview and I connect with people who have traveled, but I value that lifestyle that we're dooming them towards better than I do value what I was being programmed towards.
Yeah,
Growing
and
up.
it seems like it's a little easier, or would be easier for them with the tools that you're giving them growing up, to go back to that lifestyle if they want it. So it's almost like they're even though they're not experiencing that now, they're kind of developing a more well-rounded life, because if they want to do that, they can go back, but then they still have the tools to understand, the difference between the two, and navigate that for themselves. Um, was there anything that kind of scared you when you had first started that journey? Because it sounds like you're pretty well connected, or have, found books and communities to help support you through the lifestyle that you've chosen. But I think what happens when people take that first step is they get very scared and they feel cut off, and they're taking a step into something that they don't know, so the tools aren't necessarily at their disposal.
Yeah, when we first started, we had nothing. We had tried to find other families who had done this. And the only thing we had was, you know, these sort, like I said, these digital nomads and these digital nomad hotspots, and saying like Chiang Mai is fantastic, or whatever, and all this. And it's like, well, you go there, and because we're a family, we can't stay in these hostels, and we can't stay in these super cheap 1-bedroom apartments in the main part of Chiang Mai. And so we ended up renting a house 20 minutes outside of town. And it's like, it's a completely different scenario, because now you need scooters to get into town, and you need two because you can't all fit on one. And yes, we did put our tiny kids on scooters and had a blast. There are pictures to prove it. And but when it comes down to it, we finally, I mean, like, it got really obvious. The reason why we didn't stay in Southeast Asia was because one of my sons and my wife were experiencing some really severe heat stroke, to the point where we were just walking in the neighborhood of where we were staying, and we wouldn't even get 3 minutes away from the house, just going for a leisurely walk in the afternoon, and my son would be almost to the point of passing out. The fact that I'd have to carry him back to the house, and then, cool him down, put him in a bath, that sort of thing, to try and regulate his temperature. We realized at that point that we can't stay in the tropics, that we need to get them on to somewhere else. But what I failed to realize was, if I complain about the heat and humidity on Facebook, when it was, let's just say, the majority of my friends were on Facebook were from Michigan and from location-dependent lifestyles. And so when I did make a comment, they were just like, well, then why don't you just move back home? And it was like, well, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, just because I'm frustrated with the heat and humidity here doesn't mean that I have to give up this lifestyle and move home. And so it was at that moment that we realized we were really alone, that there is no support out there. And so we 2 years later, I mean, it's been 2.5 years, and we have created groups, we've created support channels, we do a weekly podcast to support these families, because there are thousands of them, but they don't, because the word independent is in their title or their category, and that's not an accidental word. These families set out to do this despite what their families and friends do, and they really are independent folks, but yet we all long for community. And so we've set up a Facebook group called Location Independent Families, of where we've got, today we just hit 700 in there. And there's another community that's around 12,000. They're a different community, and so they're a little bit more open, but there's to only those with kids. And there's these two communities represent the thousands of families that are out here traveling, doing their thing. There's another website that's pulling together right now called World Schoolers Connect, and that is run by a friend of mine who he's trying to make it so that if you happen to be in a similar location as another traveling family that you guys can get together and do a play date. And it's lonely out here, and if your kids don't speak the language of the locals, it is always nice to have other traveling families that you can meet up with, because the kids become instant friends. The adults do too, but it helps them to have some playmates who speak English, who are their same age or whatever. And so it gives a break. And so, like there's all these different support structures that are coming together, mostly as the community is just really growing. I'm thankful that we have this way to support families. We've seen a couple of really dramatic support situations, depression, anxiety, lack of support from family, and all of this has been dealt with within the community. Like other traveling families are saying encouraging and helpful things. And so like I know that this is helping people, and I wish that it had been there when we stepped out 2.5 years ago, but there's all kinds of families who are planning to do this, and they're still just now discovering this support network. And it's like, we just can't get the word out fast enough. And I'm sure there are families who are doing this, who are struggling or will face struggles, and they don't know the level of support that is out there for them.
That's really amazing to hear, and it's awesome, because I think what ends up being lost in a lot of people's travels is kind of that goal, or that level of like feeling fulfilled in helping other people, because inherently when you start traveling, you have to really focus on a lot of things that are maintaining and kind of keeping up with yourself. And so I think that is potentially why a lot of people become a little saddened or cut off, is because it's very different to have to, upkeep your vehicle like we were talking about earlier, and deal with all of these little things that pop up. Was it what was it like kind of getting involved or helping to start that community, and how did you end up getting into that versus, I think it's really easy to travel a lot and get into the mindset of, I'm just working to support travel, and then I end up traveling, and then I end up needing to work more, and you kind of like just go back and forth, and that's where people end up missing that fulfillment thing that they're looking for in travel to begin with.
Yeah, we had a couple of misstarts on that, of trying to get the community together, and some of the guys in my mastermind group just said, go to the mall, go to where the people are. The people are on Facebook. Set up a Facebook group and achieve all of your goals. And they were exactly right. I've tried for 1.5 years to get this going, and it was just failing left, right, and center. In fact, the effort I was doing, a guy saw and said, well, I can do it better. And he started his own thing. And so it's just like, oh, this is not working the way I wanted it to. And so now, we just started this Facebook group in February, and we had been doing the podcast for a while. I think we started that, oh boy, it might have been a year now. I think it was October last year. So we're coming up on a year. But between the two of them, I guess what I'm looking at is I look at that as a long-term potential revenue situation. And so if I can spend a half hour a day investing in that, and 5 years, 2 years, 6 weeks down the road, I come up with something that is going to be helpful to this community and yet financially beneficial to me and my family, great. If not, I've just helped thousands of people, and I love doing it. I'm really passionate about this lifestyle and helping others live it. So that's, it's like I really want to help others make the transition and to live the lifestyle. So yeah, I find fulfillment in that. I think some of it, and you're exactly right, like there is a lot of logistics that come into this lifestyle of that take time of like, where are we going? How are we going to get there? What are we going to do there? Find an Airbnb house, find a campground, it is that we might need. And it's like, that can get tiresome and challenging, especially when you're moving fast. In our case, we've been sitting still for multiple months, and that's how we like to do it. Like, we're going to be this winter, we're going to be heading over to the Yucatan, and we'll probably move every 3 or 4 weeks, maybe, unless a place that we're at we don't like, then we might move once a week, or something, or a little bit more flexible. But I'm going to do two things. One, it's going to eat into my productivity at work and my availability for my hobbies, which are, helping other location independent families. Um, what's nice is right now, this summer, we've had a chance to catch up on a lot of things, to put a lot of systems in place. And so my hope is when we start to travel again, on a more faster pace, then we'll be able to, keep the systems running without us, not showing up or being completely overwhelmed. So, it really just, I think, a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of opportunity, and a little bit of luck or serendipity, and things work. Like I said, I've tried for, you know, well over a year before we actually found success with a growing group who are very attentive and supportive to everybody else. So, um, yeah, like one of the topics that's going around that's actually really, really discussed in the group right now is, I want to have a baby overseas. What does that look like? And so there's about 4 or 5 moms who are, you know, traveling or wanting to travel and wanting to have a baby outside of their home country. And so there's a lot of questions and a lot of really interesting things. And it's like, if you didn't have this group to ask that in, you're on your own and reinventing the wheel, trying to do all this research. So the fun part is, my wife is really passionate about this, and she's doing a bunch of research for us, but also gets to share it with the group. And so she's helping 3 or 4 other moms. And it's just really, really fun to watch that dynamic come together. So I would say, because we're passionate about it, have a whole lot of travel going on right now. There's more activity happening. But I think the passion is what drives it.
What's really cool about that to me and very interesting is how many people like yourself I find in the space that you're in. It seems like a lot of people come from this interesting mix of like a creative but also an analytical background, whether that be like graphic design like myself, or I believe you came from a web development background. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. I'm actually a certified nerd, I like to say. I came from an IT background
Okay.
and then switched over into digital marketing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I can code up websites, I can do all that, but I'm really better at doing more SEO, PPC, landing page conversion optimization, etc.
Yeah, and I came from, at least classic schooling wise, a marketing background, and I still have my hand in a lot of marketing efforts to this day. And it's interesting to me how that type of person, at least from my perspective, seems like they kind of latch on to that like travel thing, and then immediately say, "This is what I really enjoy doing. How do I continue this as a lifestyle?" And they end up, reverting back to that marketing background in as a way to kind of, keep the fire stoked.
It's crazy. There are certain career paths that are easier than others to transition into location independence. Anything in marketing, anything in sort of a consulting or agency model is going to work super fantastic for making a location independent lifestyle. Um, but yeah, there's like really creative out of the box ideas as well. People will come to me and be like, hey, I want to become a location independent family, but and I'm a dentist. And it's like, okay, so you can't see doing dental work as a location independent lifestyle. Correct. And it's like, I get it. We're not there yet of where you can just set up a start working on anybody on the street in any country. However, and you can't do it remotely, via robots quite yet. That will come soon. However, I do personally know a dentist who uh, gave up that location dependent lifestyle, and she now instructs dentists to help them pass a certain test that they need a certain qualification. And so, um, physically hands-on in somebody's mouth anymore, but she's still a qualified dentist, and she needs to keep her qualifications in order to do the teaching that she does. But she teaches all online and has courses, and so it is my firm belief that if you want to, you can find a way to turn your career or skills or expertise into a location independent lifestyle or independent revenue. Um, what you were talking about, Nick, is some of us have it easier than others because we're already working an office job on a computer, and it blends into an agency model pretty easily, or a consulting model pretty easily. Um, but I firmly believe that there's possible for anybody to do it. I'm working with a tennis coach who's really well renowned, who was at Wimbledon this year, etc. And yeah, he's got this pretty sweet. He's got 2 coaching programs of where one is he's coaching the players, and 2 he's coaching the coaches, and they're all online. And he's a tennis coach. That's what he does, and he's able to correct people's swings through Google Hangouts. And so it's pretty sweet to see those sorts of things actually taking off and happening.
Yeah, it seems like that aspect of the lifestyle that you live is something that I think most people have the most questions about, because their first thought is, okay, I want to do this, and then their second thought is, how do I make that happen? And I think that's where a lot of people end up getting stuck, because they're not able to necessarily link their skills with something that could help create a revenue stream for them that allows them to continue traveling. Have you, through the groups that you've kind of run and the people that you've met, have you found some ways that people unlike ourselves that might not be in the marketing side of things, how they've been able to kind of sustain that lifestyle for themselves?
Yeah, there's 2 things that I always come kind of 2 steps you need to take before you do this. Is one, realize that we move to cheaper to live locations. For example, today I took the day off and our whole crew went to a water park, and we ate from the food stand at a water park. We spent the whole day there. And can you imagine what that would cost to feed 6 people at a concession stand at a water park, and the tickets to get in and all this? Yeah, I spent less than $50 today.
That's awesome.
You couldn't get away with that in the States. And so like, look at it that way and say, wait, if I can completely cut my cost of living, I think our family is living off of somewhere around $2,500 a month. A lot for a single person. It's next to nothing for a family of 6.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
And so, yeah, the challenge is to help people understand that, hey, what if you just do that? What if you just drop your expenses, your living needs, by selling your house, selling your cars, getting rid of your junk that's costing you money and that you're paying to upkeep, and really reducing and getting down to a place where, oh, by the way, we go and get massages, we eat out every other day, if not every day. I mean, we are not doing the rice and beans Dave Ramsey thing in the States. we are actually living a decent standard of living for significantly less just by changing where we're living. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, well, I kind of already hit on that, but if you lower your expenses like that, and the house is the biggest one, it costs me $500 a month to live, all my utilities and everything for all six of us right now. I don't know anybody who's paying that little for a family our size in the States. We were pretty impressed that we got away with around somewhere between 800 to 1,000. Or no, if you include utilities, we were definitely at 1,000. And so, we had a really low mortgage, but most people don't. And right now we're looking at $500. That's it. That's all I have to spend on housing and utilities in a given month. So right there off the bat, if you can get rid of your house and cars, reduce everything, and move to another location where things are cheaper, then you can look at your, income, because it's, do you make more or do you spend less? Well, what if you do both? Which make more, but look at, you're working for insurance, you're working for benefits, you're working for blah, 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 healthcare and all this. And it's like, by the way, healthcare outside of the States is dirt cheap and really quality. A surgery that should cost $45,000 with hospital stay, etc., will cost less than $3,000. So, and you get the same quality surgeons trained at, Harvard Medical School, the same quality MRIs and CAT scan machines and laser surgery and all this. And you're going to the private hospital, which is the top of the line, and you're only paying $3,000. So, like, change all of your mindset about what you need from a job and back that all up and say, what if I don't need that? 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 And you realize that not only have you gone from needing $5,000 cash a month to maintain everything to now $2,500, and you've gotten rid of all of these other obligations. Can I make $2,500 a month online doing something? Well, not out of the gate unless you've got the Midas touch. But if you work at it for 6 months to a year, yeah, you can easily get to $2,500 a month. Not that difficult. And it just depends on what it is you want to do. One of the easiest things to do for anybody who's college graduate in the United States or Australia or England or wherever, is to write. There are so many businesses that need writers, and there are networks of, you can put your shingle out and start writing. There are lots of people who have found random success on Fiverr. You'd think Fiverr, $5 a gig, really? That's it? But some people are paying $150 a gig on Fiverr because there's all these upsells.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine who's a physical trainer, he's now just like, well, there's this big Amazon FBA thing and everybody needs good product photography. If they ship the products to me with a return label, I'll charge them $5 to take 10 pictures of him that are that are great for Amazon. And then he's got upsells, if you want multiple products or multiple shots or whatever. And so he's doing it as a hobby, but he's making $500-600 a month. And it's like, if you start doing these sorts of things, I just talked to the guy about patchwork revenue. If you start doing these sorts of things where you're only making $525 and then you start building upon that and you start making $500, well, all you need to do is do 4 or 5 things that are like that are each making $500, and suddenly you've got 2,500 location independent revenue coming in, and you can afford to live in Mexico as a family. So that's really where I encourage people to go to, is to say, okay, how can you transfer your skills online? How can you think outside of the box of something that doesn't hurt you, you don't hate yourself for doing, um, but that you can do really well and gets you to that point where you this location independent money coming in that you can build upon at the same time as you're drastically cutting your costs. And what that'll do is afford you that opportunity to live that lifestyle, find out A, if it works for your family, and then B, it also gives you a whole lot of time to work on whatever that big project is that might make a lot of money. So, for example, say you were a mechanical engineer and now you're making money on Fiverr and writing things for people on some other network or whatever. And it's like, now I really want to create a course on how to do the best mechanical engineering or whatever, or what I learned. I want to write a book, what I learned about mechanical engineering that my college never taught me. Something like that. Like, go for it, self-publish. You can do it now because you have the time, because one, you're not keeping up with the Joneses. Two, you're not working as much because your patchwork revenue doesn't take as much time as a 40-hour week where you're not really productive for 40 hours. And three, you're not spending as much, so you can afford to, spend 2 days a week working on a creative project. So all that being said, that's kind of the pattern of how people are doing it right now.
I'm so glad that you laid that out for people too, because it's funny to me that the majority of other people, when you get into that lifestyle, or when they see other people get into that lifestyle, they immediately think that it's irrational and that it doesn't work. But in reality, I think the way that most people get into it is by being more than totally rational, in that they're looking at their finances and the way that they live, and they're looking at it long term and saying, this isn't sustainable. One, I'm not going to be happy, and two, I'm working to just survive, which at a certain point you can't really do it anymore. Like, you want something else, you're not being fulfilled, and I think that's kind of how people end up getting pushed. But from your perspective, what do you think is the whether that's one common thread that you've seen, or maybe a couple different things that end up being the tipping point for how people end up, finally taking that step? Because I think, and I've talked about this with a lot of other people, is that fear seems to be one of the big ones. And that, there's a few things that any individual might be thinking about that kind of prevents them from, actually getting into it. What have you seen that look like?
Now, fear, because we made plans and we were all about this and let's go live this lifestyle. It took me, after choosing the plane tickets, we had the cash on hand, our house was being sold, we have to go to the Philippines, and it took me a good 48 hours before I clicked purchase, because I was just so paralyzed by fear. What if we fail? What if we spend all this money and we go bankrupt? Which we ended up having a challenge due to losing some business. The common thread that I see of people getting over these fears, because there's a ton of fear of going against the stream, or a ton of fear of living outside of the box or going against the stream, because there's quote unquote no support, and everybody around you is going one direction and you're choosing to go the complete opposite. And it just, everything in you, it screams, there's a reason why everybody's going the right direction and you need to go the right direction. And so it's really like people hear our story and they start, to admire us or whatever, and they start to think that way, and they're like, well, what could this look like for me, or how could I do this? And then the thing that I see that ends up pushing people over the edge is either a personal family matter. I've seen things like problems at school, or problems with, um, extended families, or the bigger one is somebody gets fired. and or loses a job or gets downsized or their company goes bankrupt or whatever the case is, they suddenly don't have the money they thought they would have coming in from, quote, a stable job. And so they're suddenly going, okay, is this a sign? Do I need to do this? What is this like? And that really puts them into the, okay, I have an opportunity right now. I've got a 2-month severance package, or I've got unemployment for the next 6 months that we're going to have to tighten our belts, but we could do something. And that gives them that encouragement that they can actually try this and give it a try for 6 months. And I've seen that being one of the more helpful motivators. There are other people who are just like, screw it, I know what I want and I'm going to make it happen. I've got my 2-year game plan and we're going to get there. And I'm impressed with those people. But there are a lot of other people who basically a challenge comes into their life, forcing them to make a decision. And not everybody chooses this route. Even those who want to, they still fear still drives them and they find a stable job. But a lot of times that is the crux of the position. I was just talking with a guy the other day who ran for Congress and cashed in his 401k, and they had no money left when the campaign was done, and he lost. And they sold their house, or they were living in a rental because they'd already remortgaged their house and sold it. And so they got out of the rental and they moved into their parents' garage. Because he just had nothing, no money, no contacts, no ability to work anywhere. And that's what turned him into finding location independent money, revenue, and later he's flying to Thailand when he wants to and heading to Costa Rica for 6 months. And, they're just gallivanting around the world because of that negative story that pushed him over the edge.
Yeah, and so you mentioned challenges and kind of brought up that failure that guy had had. It seems like you have quite a bit of stories behind you to pull from in that regard. Are there a couple that you could talk about that were, I guess, in your mind, a little bit more major setbacks or challenges that ended up happening, that ended up either potentially being good or that you kind of learned from?
I'm trying to pull one out of thin air right now. I've used all my examples. I make it my goal to really get to know people living this lifestyle. So that's why I have these examples that I can pull from. I end up probably every other day spending some quality time on the phone with somebody similar, doing this lifestyle, or online, going through a chat or whatever. So, there's as many stories as there are people, as to what are the devastations that pushed him over the edge. I can't. That Congress one was the biggest one that I could come up with. I don't think I've got anything else that tops that.
No,
Yeah,
no,
sorry.
no worries. That was a good one. Because it's weird. You don't see a lot of the stories, the backstories of the people that ended up quote unquote failing from something that big. You end up seeing the people that end up taking the election, and then they get put into the media, and then you don't see what happened to that other person's life. And I think that's almost where the real learning is, and where the more interesting stories and things like that come from, is from the people that had something not work out, and then they go and do something totally different but way more awesome with their life.
Yeah. And I've got a weird story from my life of where I'm running this digital marketing agency and everything's going great, but I didn't realize where my referrals were coming from. And it wasn't like I hadn't met half my clients. So I figured, no big deal. We can fly around the world and everything, will still keep coming in. The way agency worlds work, you lose some clients and you get some new ones in. And so they're just sometimes there's dips, sometimes things are a little crazy and you got too many clients, but it kind of all evens out in the end. Well, when I left the States initially, my referral network completely dried up. And I realized what had happened. One of my competitors was having such a gangbusters year that he was hiring 3 or 4 people. And it was because I wasn't around anymore in people's minds. Oh, Paul left the country. They stopped referring people to me, and so um, that's where I was saying the business dried up, and like we lost 90% of our revenue in 3 months, and that was after we were already overseas, and suddenly things just went and it was gone, and and so we still have some debt that we incurred during that time. Um, Coming through that, I built better systems for referrals, for new clients, for acquiring new clients. I built in more of a sales method into myself. And then I also have, like, I don't do custom proposals anymore. Like, I have these products, these productized services that you can purchase. And that has made it a whole lot easier for people to purchase. They just go online, they type in their credit card information, and boom, we get to start working on it. And so that has made it side for selling, but it's also made it really easy on the client side for purchasing. So, coming out of a major failure, even in the middle of being location independent, there's a ton of different stories. I know of another guy who his wasn't a major failure. His was actually he was a music teacher. He taught tutored kids on piano and trumpet and all these things, and realized that, hey, this functionality, this is really challenging of scheduling and keeping, what was the homework I gave this kid, and because you're constantly seeing 5 or 6 different kids every day, and once a week, and what did I give this kid, and how much, and what, and all this, and what should they be learning. And so he developed a system and turned it into a software, and that was 10 years ago. And they've been location independent for 10 years. And he doesn't teach music per se anymore to his kids. He does, but he just manages a piece of software that helps music teachers keep their students organized. So, there's all kinds of different stories.
Yeah, and it's funny because I there was a quote that I had heard somewhere, and I've always kind of kept it to heart, which it was something like embrace the squiggle. And I think it's really cool because a lot of people have this view of how they think their life is going to go, and the only way to really move forward and have the best time that you can and be really open to new experiences is understanding that things are going to change, and that the only thing that you can do is kind of adapt to the shitty curveballs that life throws at you sometimes. Because I had a very similar story where I was on Kauai at one point, and I remember being out on the water surfing and like looking up at all these mountains, and I was doing a lot of freelance work at that time, and I just remember thinking, I'm on the top of the world right now. I'm doing all of my work location independent, and I'm in this beautiful place soaking up all this amazing stuff and doing all these really cool things. And then within a month I had a similar experience to you where the client well dried up, and essentially went back to ground zero and had to build it all back up again. But I think you learn so much in those experiences. You end up being more resilient. You learn how to adapt to change a little bit more, and then on top of it, you kind of understand that life has these really high highs and these really low lows, and it just it kind of forces you to chill out a little bit more, and that more of the highs are going to come, but more of the lows are going to come also, and that the middle path is kind of the way to go.
Yeah, but also enjoy it. I mean, I think the best thing that I've learned to do is to try and voice my stress in the lows. And, I have a great partner, my wife, who helps me through that. She knows it before I voice it, but voicing it kind of owns up to it. And, and just kind of like, this is really, terrible. I don't want to say bad words on a podcast, but, this sucks. And just kind of expressing that, and her just being like, yep, I know, but we're going to pull through it, and you're going to do great work, and you're going to pull out. And so I really appreciate having that. But then also at the same time, like, really enjoy those highs. I just hit a certain record yesterday, as far as revenue goes, and in our business and our systems. And so I was able to sit down my, president of the board, who happens to be my wife, and say, hey, we just hit this threshold, and I'd really like to hire. It's a little early as far as financially, can we afford it? But we're on such a trajectory that we need this to be able to keep going. And she agreed. And like, I get to really enjoy the fact that I get to bless somebody else financially by hiring them to do this work, location independent, and I get the blessing of not having to do the work and having it done better. And so, this is not my first hire. This is the fourth person on our team right now. But it's such a joy for me to be able to bring somebody on board, because it does relieve me from stress and pressure, but it also is just like, I get to help somebody live their life dreams, and or stable out some of their revenue issues, and all of that. Like, you can't just say just choose the middle road. I think when you're experiencing one of those highs, things are going well and you're on the top of the world, I think you really need to, Mexicans love the word tranquilo. You need to really enjoy it in a tranquilo way. And so, like, I'm not bouncing off the walls and spending money like a bipolar person right now, but I am just grinning from ear to ear. And having taken the day off today and spending with the kids at the water park, and just get up and saying, life could be like this. I see it. The light is at the end of the tunnel. And so I'm pretty excited. But you need those times to be able to handle the times when things don't go according to plan. And I can tell you all kinds of travel things that never go according to plan. And it's not just missing a flight. It involves, and you can link to this in the show notes. I know this is going long, but trying to avoid immigration and getting caught by the state police. It also, we've also been deported from a country before. So, like, travel things don't always work out. and so, when they do, when you're having a blast, live it, enjoy it, soak it up. And when they don't, tranquilo, just mellow, chill.
I think, that's great advice. And it's something that I guess I try and live by, but I think there's also a difficulty in, trying to be relaxed about it, in kind of a low key, cool way where you're able to soak it up, but you're also not necessarily diving too far into the thought of, like, well, in the future, there could be some more pretty crappy stuff happening. I think, the way that at least I approach that is kind of just living in the moment a little more and being more accepting of what's happening now versus where my thought process can easily lead to, since I think people like us are a little bit more analytical, and it's easy to let your head go to a place of what happens if this happens, and what if this goes wrong, and blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, the what ifs are awful, man, because they're right under the surface. And don't think that I've got this all put together and I know what I'm doing. I have the blessing, like I said, of having a wife who is able to see it and help me through it. But um, I still have to work so hard at chilling out and just, excuse me, just letting it happen. And yeah, I think, as us, I think it's more of a Western first world mindset, entrepreneurial, push, go, get things done quick and efficient. And I think the longer I'm in Mexico, the more tranquilo I am.
One last quick question before we kind of end things, because this is about the time where people end up falling off, I guess, and you kind of mentioned it there. How do you end up choosing the next location that you're at? Because I had seen that cool tool that you had put up on the website that's showing, your trajectory or kind of where your plans are. How do you end up planning out the spots and then, actually following through with those?
Well, we're looking for a cross section right now because we're looking for a home base, a place where we want to visit or live for 6 months out of the year and then go travel from there. And so we're really looking at low cost of living, high speed internet, and certain temperatures. So we're looking for the idyllic temperature. And we're finding that there's some places in Mexico, and there's a couple of places on our list in Ecuador. And so, yeah, we're to make sure that we visit those places, that we spend quality time there, that we really soak it in, and not just do a first impression. Although it's pretty easy for us to choose within a day or two, like, no, this is not our place. But yeah, so then, anyways, we've covered 16 out of the 31 states in Mexico, and this winter we'll hit another 9. So out of the 31 states by the time we've been in Mexico for a year and a half. I think that's pretty impressive. I'm pretty excited about that. But our goal is not to cover all of Mexico. It just so happens that there's lots of really great spots in Mexico and see if they're going to work for our family, if they're going to be something where we want to live for a longer period of time. My daughter really wants horses, and my wife does as well. And so that's one of our next life goals, is to get to a place where we can, and guess what? Horses are cheaper in Mexico. And so, like if we can get to a place where we can have a little bit of a ranch and have somebody help us take care of the horses when we're not there. So that's the next life goal. And whether that's going to be in Mexico or Ecuador, we don't know. But that's kind of, so that's how we plan out where we're going, is just by doing some research, some reading. And, we're still visiting places that we researched 2 years ago. So it's not, and new places will come up on the radar as we talk to other people or as we hang out here. They'll be like, oh, you really got to go check out this, or you got to go see this. And easier for us to say, well, that's not going to work for us for X, Y, or Z reason, so it doesn't make the list. But excuse me. But we've added a few places that weren't on our original list, and one of them actually is number one in running for becoming a home base for us. So, there's along the way, as much as you can plan, be open to serendipity of what else is there that would jive well with us and our crew.
Awesome. Well, congrats on all the business success, and everything with the family and the travels in general. I think it's really cool, all the things that you have going on. Are there a couple shout outs that you want to make here before we kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, well, the first thing, if you have kids and you're interested in doing this sort of crazy lifestyle, or if you're wanting or planning on having kids in the next year or two, and want to investigate more on support of this lifestyle, just search for Location Independent Families on Facebook and ask to join the group. And you can send me a message. I'm Paul Kortman on Facebook, fairly easy to find. But you can also go to nomadtogether.com, which is where we have our podcast, our guidebook on becoming a location independent family, and the link to the Facebook group. And if you want to follow the crazy Kortman crew and get to know the name of our dog, you can homealong.com. Just get to know the name of our RV and all kinds of crazy, warm, fuzzy feelings about our family. And you can stalk us.
Awesome. Well, sweet. I'll be sure to put a couple of those links in the show notes if you want to shoot those over as well.
Certainly.
Sweet. Well, it was great talking with you. Let's definitely do this again. I'd love to keep up with kind of where you guys are at and the progress of the travel and the horse ranch situation.
Yeah, it's a crazy dream, and we'll see what happens. And maybe it won't happen for another 2 years, but my wife and daughter are aiming for now, so we'll see. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. And I am going to hopefully go hit some more coffee because you definitely passed those yawns onto me there in the last couple of minutes.
Sorry about that, man.
It's all good.
All right.
Well, yeah, take it easy. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Anytime. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.